everyone, this is Astron 1701 out in the oil field again. Well, it's kind of a daily thing for me, and I figured I might do a troubleshoot video. I've been waiting on a rig now for 4 days to get on this one and pull it. It's got an issue down hole, what we call a parted rod. At least that's how she acts. Get this fence out of the way here. Alright, so I've had it down since Sunday, and way to tell a parted rod is usually from swing and how the unit sits. Now, to understand how I'm troubleshooting this, you gotta kind of know how these things work. So you see, this is a crank balance Lufkin. The weights there on the cranks are set to offset the weight of the rods. And the rods are connected to this polish rod here via the bridle, go all the way down to a downhole pump. Rod pull pump on this one. What we call an insert. It's parted very deep because after it swung several times, it went into downstroke, which means she's rod heavy. Normally, a well that's balanced properly, when the rods part, it'll stay down in the upstroke, which is the head pointing up. But also, I need to check for a hole in the tubing, because that could cause it too. So this little setup here is designed for continuous treat, and this is how I check the fluid. So I'm going to open this valve up here, it's connected to the tubing, put my finger over it, and open this one. And what I'm trying to see if it tries to suck my finger in, and it's not, it's actually dripping a little bit. It might actually be filled up enough that when I start her back up, it'll show quote unquote pump action or fluid out of it. Always check your electric box. Use the back of your hand, because if there's a short, the arc will cause your muscles to contract, pull you away from it. Start it up. So nothing real obvious at first. But you look at the polish rod here, it's supposed to be shiny silver. It rads into packing, and it's not. It's turned dark right there. Don't know if you can see it against the sunlight. That's one sign that the packing got hot, meaning there's no fluid at the top here at the surface. Also, I'm looking for a flood pound. I'm not seeing one. So the rod's shaking when it changes over their top. Kind of meaning it's dangling there at the bottom instead of being connected to the pump properly. So I'm now going to open the bleeder back up. Ain't got nothing. This well here makes about 150 barrels a day. About 4.5 oil on a good day. On average, about 3 when she pumps down. So yeah, and I can hear a tink, very slight. I do not know if that is picking up, but I can hear a tinking sound, possibly the rods hitting the tubing. So now I'm going to shut it down, and when I do, watch what the unit does. Now, most of the time when you shut one down, it goes into a neutral position, either upstroke, downstroke, or sitting level. Sitting level is ideal, meaning that it's perfectly balanced. I prefer rod heavy because it puts it in downstroke. So if you have a power outage or something happened, the well goes down, it goes into a natural downstroke, closing the pump and keeping any kind of trash or scale or anything that could be in the pump from sticking her up. And then that's automatically a pulling job to fix it. So here we go. We're going to shut it down now. Watch what she does. 1. Oh, now that's interesting. That's different than the other day. There's the swing. That's what I'm looking for. We're going to check it again. There we go. And that is a parted rod. It's got enough fluid in the hole, it's floating it. Some at the bottom. So now she's going to go down in the upstroke instead of downstroke. And sit there and rock. And that's it. Just got to have a rig come and pull the rods out. They'll run a special tool down there through the tubing. Got little barbs on it. It'll hook onto the parted rod and it'll pull it back up. And we change out the rod on it. Inspect any other rods. I suspect this is parted due to hydrogen embrittlement. The way you solve that is with treating down hole with biocide. That's what that piece of pipe with the hose on it there is for. You circulate it. Depending on the volume, the fluid the well makes, depends on how long you circulate them. Ideally, you want to get your rods coated, your tubing coated, casing coated, and your rods coated when it comes back up. And that stops the pitting in the rods. And what happens when the pits get big enough, get deep enough, the strain of being pulled on causes them to part because the metals become brittle. It'll also happen to tubing. I was on a well yesterday up north for the company to inspect a pump. And when I got there, they were just getting done pulling the tubing. And it had giant holes in it. Looked like someone shot it with a gun or a lightning bolt or something. And the rig operator called it electrolysis. Because that's kind of what it looks like, what it did to the metal. If you're familiar with the electrolysis plating process or the electrolysis rust removal process, you know that your sacrificial steel will get pits in it. And if you do it too long to what you're trying to clean, depending on your polarity charge, what you're cleaning will get pits in it. And that can happen down in a well. But more often, what mostly causes that is called hydrogen embrittlement. And it has to do with bacteria inside the well itself. And that's commonly formed by air going down the casing. Something not sealing properly, usually around the casing head, fittings on the casing side not being as tight as they should, or sealing a valve being bad. Unless you got casing that's got pressure on it, you'll likely never find it unless it's got a real hard vacuum. But if you get air down in your well, it causes the formation of bacteria. And that bacteria eats the metal and makes it brittle. And, since it's called hydrogen embrittlement, I think it has something to do with what type of bacteria it is. And you run the biocide down it to prevent it. Now, this well had been down for quite some time before this company I'm working for bought it. And even though I resumed treating on it, the damage was already done. I just kind of prolonged it by as much as I could. Now, the original company that ran everything, they didn't change out all the rods when they pulled it that I thought should be changed. When I was put in control of everything, I changed how we do things. I go back to the old ways. If you question it, you throw it to the side and you replace it. When you pull a pump, you get the pump dressed. Now, on the one yesterday, I inspected the pump. The pump, aside from having some scale built up on it, looked new. It slid tight. Everything felt like it should. It's a travel tube style pump, which is not my preferred style of pump. A travel tube has the rods pull the barrel of the pump instead of the plunger. And the plunger stays stationary on it instead of the barrel. And the rig hand took a screwdriver and pried the ball shut where it wouldn't open. Now I tried to push the pump back in and it wouldn't bypass through the barrel or plunger at any point. It only let me push it in when he released pressure off the ball. So that tells me balls and seats are good. Now there are things you can do in the field, especially when you got to do things on a budget, that you can troubleshoot these things. I checked the seating cups on the seating nipple. They weren't cut. They weren't really all that compressed. They looked fine. I looked in the seating nipple and it didn't show wear. Looked good. So I would say that well probably had been pulled for a bad pump. They put another pump in it, couldn't get it to produce anything because it probably had a small hole in the tubing at the time, and they just left it sit there because the prior company was really bad about doing that. So, you know, we tested the tubing. 3 joints had already been identified as bad, and then there were 2 joints blew. So we just had to change out 5 joints of tubing. I took 4 rods out of the string of rods that had good big pits in them from hydrogen embrittlement, and pulled them aside and said they needed to replace those. And hopefully by the end of the day they'll get that well back running. Another person pumps that. I'm just I do that. That's a supervisory part of my job, is what I went up there to do. And you know, it's just part of what you got to do when you're running an oil well and oil company, is you got to have a person that can look at the equipment when it comes out of the well and see what does it look like. You know, is it pitted? If there's a hole in the tube, and what caused it? How do you fix it? How do you prevent it? Now, everything mechanical wears. All of it does. But there's ways to mitigate that wear to extend the lifetime. And that's part of what I do, is I solve these problems for the companies I work for. I say companies, but I really only work for one right now. But with that being said, this is Astron 1701 signing off. Have a wonderful day. Be good to each other and try to be better than you were the day before. Take care and have a good one.